Have you ever looked in the mirror not just physically, but metaphorically and felt a quiet, creeping disgust? Not at something you did, but at what you are. That gnawing feeling that something inside is fundamentally wrong, broken, unworthy. You might not even say it out loud. It might just echo in your mind during the quiet moments, "I hate myself." But what if I told you that this isn't just a feeling? According to Jung, it's far more dangerous than that. It's a psychological spell you cast on yourself, one that slowly, inevitably, transforms you into the very thing you claim to despise. Jung didn't talk about self-hatred the way modern self-help culture does. He didn't just see it as a mindset issue or a confidence problem. No, he saw it as a symptom of a much deeper fracture in the soul, a rupture between who you are and who you pretend to be. And when that fracture remains unconscious, untouched, and unhealed, it grows. It infects your choices, your relationships, your dreams. And in Jungian terms, it allows the shadow to take over. And once your shadow begins to govern your life from the dark, you are no longer the one living your life, you are the one being lived by it.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The shadow is not some vague metaphor. It is the container of all the parts of you that you've rejected, denied, suppressed, or feared. It holds your anger, your sexuality, your ambition, your selfishness, your pain, but also your potential, your creativity, your power. You see, the shadow isn't just full of bad stuff. It's full of everything you haven't allowed yourself to be. And when you say, "I hate myself," what you might really be saying is, "I hate the truth of myself." Why? Because so much of who you are has been deemed unacceptable by your upbringing, your culture, your peers. You were told to be good, polite, productive, strong, selfless. And in order to meet those demands, you had to amputate parts of your personality. But those parts didn't die. They just went underground. And now they're speaking through your self-hatred. That hatred is not just emotional, it's existential. It's your unconscious mind screaming, "You betrayed me." And the paradox is this: the longer you reject those parts, the more power they gain. Jung warned us that what you resist persists. So when you resist the truth of yourself, you don't erase it, you become enslaved by it. Slowly, you act out the very behaviors you fear. You become bitter instead of kind, passive instead of assertive, destructive instead of creative. It happens silently, gradually, and then one day you look up and realize you've become the very version of yourself you were trying to avoid. Let me make this more real. Let's say you're someone who prides themselves on being calm, in control, rational. You suppress your anger because you think it's ugly or unspiritual. But over time, that anger doesn't go away. It curdles. It becomes resentment, bitterness. It leaks out as sarcasm, passive aggressiveness, manipulative behavior. You don't even realize it's happening. But your shadow is active. You've disowned the fire in you, and now it's burning your life down in the background. Or maybe you hate your laziness. You think you're weak, unmotivated, useless. But what if that laziness is your soul's refusal to participate in a life that lacks meaning? What if your body is saying, "I'm exhausted of pretending to be someone I'm not"? Every time you insult yourself, every time you shame yourself, you're not motivating change, you're reinforcing a lie. You're saying, Who I am is not allowed to exist. And that's the most violent thing we do to ourselves. Jung believed that the goal of life is not to become perfect. It's to become whole. Wholeness means you integrate the shadow. You look at your darkness not to indulge it, but to understand it. Because only when you face it can you choose how to act. Otherwise, your life becomes a puppet show and your unconscious pulls the strings. So what does this mean for you right now, in your real life? It means that the next time you feel that creeping self-hatred, you don't try to silence it with fake positivity. You listen. You ask, what part of me is crying for attention? What have I locked away in the dungeon of my psyche? Is it my grief? My rage? My sexuality? My desire to say no? My longing for love? These are not flaws to be fixed. They are truths to be honored. And if you don't honor them, they will haunt you. You will project them onto others. You will become jealous of people who live freely. You will criticize those who embody what you've suppressed. You will create enemies out of your own disowned self. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But what if that terror is also the doorway to your freedom? Imagine this. Instead of saying, "I hate myself," you said, "There are parts of me I haven't yet learned how to love." How different would your life feel? How different would your choices be? Your relationships? Your morning mirror? This is not about narcissism or indulgence. It's about radical integration. Because the truth is, you cannot become your highest self by cutting off your lowest parts. The light you seek is buried in the darkness you avoid. And if you continue to reject yourself, you're not just hurting, you're transforming. You're becoming the very thing you fear. But if you dare to look inward, to meet your shadow, to embrace your complexity, you become something else entirely. You become whole. You become real. You become free. What if I told you that the people who frustrate you the most, who irritate you, disgust you, or make your skin crawl, are not random enemies but mirrors? Not symbolic ones, not poetic ones, but real psychological mirrors reflecting something in you that you've disowned. Jung called this projection the unconscious act of attributing your own denied traits, fears, or potential onto others. We all do it. We spot arrogance in someone else but fail to see our own hidden superiority complex. We rage at someone's selfishness while quietly resenting our inability to say no. And here's the chilling truth. The more intense your emotional reaction to someone, the more likely it is that they're reflecting a part of your own shadow back at you. The monsters you see in others are often the monsters you refuse to see in yourself. Let's get brutally honest. Think of someone you can't stand, someone who triggers you, someone you find morally bankrupt, annoying, fake, or weak. Got them in mind? Good. Now ask yourself, what exactly about them do I hate? Write it down. Get specific. And then ask the harder question, is this trait something I've been accused of and denied? Is this something I secretly fear about myself? Or something I was punished for expressing as a child? That's where the real work begins. Let's say you despise narcissists. You call them self-centered, attention-seeking, shallow. But dig deeper. Have you ever been afraid to take up space? Have you ever silenced your own needs to be liked? Have you ever wished you could shine without guilt? Then maybe your disgust isn't just about them, It's about your own repressed longing to be unapologetically visible. Or maybe you hate manipulators. But you grew up learning how to make people happy, how to twist yourself into whatever shape was needed to avoid conflict. Is that not a kind of manipulation too? Jung would say yes, because anything you bury from conscious awareness doesn't disappear, it leaks. And projection is how the psyche keeps your blind spots alive. It's how your unconscious stays in control while pretending it's someone else's fault. This is why your triggers are sacred. They are not evidence of your moral superiority, they are invitations to awaken. Every person who annoys you is a teacher. But every trait you can't tolerate is a flare shot into the sky of your psyche saying, "Look here. This is yours." Now, this doesn't mean everyone is secretly good or that toxic behavior should be tolerated. Let's not confuse spiritual depth with naivety. But there are people who do real harm. But even in those situations, the question is still, why did I get entangled with this person? What was I unconsciously seeking or avoiding? What part of me allowed this dynamic to unfold? That's not victim blaming, that's sovereignty. That's radical self-awareness. Until you stop projecting, you are at the mercy of your own shadow. You'll keep encountering the same types of people, reliving the same emotional patterns, drawing the same dynamics into your life. And you'll think the world is full of monsters, not realizing you're carrying their blueprint within you. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's not just philosophy, it's liberation. Because the moment you recognize your projections, you reclaim power. You stop being a puppet pulled by unconscious strings. You begin to integrate. You begin to heal. And here's the wildest part. The more shadow you integrate, the less reactive you become. You no longer need to hate others to feel morally superior. You no longer need to play the victim to avoid responsibility. You no longer collapse into shame when someone reflects a trait you've tried to hide. You simply see it. You breathe. You ask, "Is this mine?" And if it is, you welcome it back. Not to indulge it, but to understand it. To give it proper expression. Because when the shadow is brought into the light, it no longer controls you, it informs you. Let me share a real story. I once coached a man who considered himself deeply kind and spiritual. He hated aggression, couldn't stand people who were loud, opinionated, or confrontational. But guess what? He was silently seething with rage. Decades of repressed anger had turned him into a passive-aggressive saboteur. He didn't yell, he undermined. He didn't fight, he withdrew love. And when he finally confronted his shadow, he realized the people he hated most were simply living out a part of him he had exiled. So he reclaimed his fire. He learned to express anger cleanly, directly, without shame, and his life transformed. Not because he became someone else, but because he became whole. So ask yourself, who do I judge the most? What do they represent? And what part of me have I buried to avoid becoming them? This is not comfortable work, it's ego-shattering. But it's also soul-reviving. Because every time you retrieve a projection, you retrieve a piece of yourself. You become less reactive and more reflective, less moralistic and more compassionate, less fragmented and more integrated. And that's the real meaning of forgiveness, not overlooking harm, but understanding the deeper mechanics of why we attract, and react the way we do. The shadow isn't just personal, it's collective. Our culture projects too. We demonize groups, ideologies, nations, celebrities. We create scapegoats to avoid looking inward. But what if healing the world starts with healing our projections? What if peace begins with owning the monster in the mirror? Jung believed that the greatest danger to humanity was not outside threats, it was our unconsciousness. And self-hatred, whether directed inward or outward, is the loudest symptom of that unconsciousness. So, if you really want freedom, don't just work on your positivity. Work on your projections. Reclaim your shadow and forgive your reflection. Because in doing so, you don't just transform how you see others, you transform who you are. Here's a truth that should both terrify and liberate you. The version of you that you're most afraid of becoming, the one you label as weak, selfish, angry, needy, till unworthy, is the exact version of you that holds the key to your power. And until you face that version, until you stop rejecting it, you will remain trapped in cycles of self-sabotage, shame, and quiet despair. Jung taught that wholeness is not the same as goodness. In fact, the pursuit of being good often blocks us from becoming whole. Why? Because to be good, we obey, we conform, we amputate, we perform. But to be whole, we must integrate what we've rejected, even, and especially, the parts of ourselves that we fear would make us unlikable, unlovable, or unworthy. The paradox is this: the more you deny these parts, the more they control you. The more you face them, the more they become allies. That means your flaws, when seen clearly, owned completely, and integrated consciously, can become your greatest source of strength. Let's take a raw example. Imagine you've spent your whole life being the caregiver, but you're the one everyone leans on. You suppress your needs, downplay your pain, and keep the peace. Society praises you. But inside you're exhausted, resentful, hollow. You fantasize about running away, screaming, or just breaking down. And then you feel guilty for even having those thoughts. Why? Because you've rejected your inner child, the part of you that needs care, the part that's vulnerable, the part that says no. You've labeled that part as weak, selfish, immature. So it lives in your shadow, and until you bring it back, you will continue to give until you collapse. But here's where the transformation happens: when you allow yourself to need, to rest, to cry, to say enough. You don't become weaker, you become real. You set boundaries. You stop pretending, you stop enabling. Your flaw becomes your freedom. Your vulnerability becomes your strength. But this is the alchemy of integration, turning the lead of your rejected self into the gold of your authentic being. Every so-called flaw contains wisdom. Your jealousy? It may be pointing to desires you're too afraid to admit. Your insecurity? It may be the voice of a younger you who is shamed for being different. Your rage? It may be the fire that burns through years of silence and compliance. None of this means you act on every impulse or justify bad behavior. Integration is not indulgence, it's ownership. It's saying, yes, this lives in me. And now that I see it, I get to choose how to express it. When your flaws are unconscious, they leak. When they're conscious, they evolve. That's the real superpower. And here's something even deeper. When you stop rejecting yourself, you stop needing constant validation from others. You stop building your identity around being liked, approved of, or admired. You become internally anchored. That means you can walk into a room and not shrink. You can speak your truth and not tremble. You can fail and not collapse. Because you're not trying to be someone else, you're just being you fully. Let's make this even more personal. Think of something you've always seen as a flaw. Maybe it's your sensitivity. Maybe it's your stubbornness. Maybe it's your tendency to overthink. For a moment, just sit with it. No judgment. Now ask, what is this trait protecting me from? What is it trying to express? What gift might be hidden inside this flaw if I stop shaming it? You might find that sensitivity is empathy in disguise. That stubbornness is persistence misdirected. That overthinking is your mind crying out for deeper understanding, not just analysis. The key is to stop moralizing your traits. Your psyche isn't good or bad, it's complex. It's layered. It's adaptive. And everything you carry was developed for a reason. Sometimes to survive, sometimes to be loved, but sometimes to protect your soul. And now, as an adult, it's your task to look at those parts not with judgment, but with curiosity. Because what you once needed to hide might now be the very thing you need to thrive. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means your healing doesn't come from pretending you're above your flaws. It comes from descending into the parts of yourself you've been taught to fear and bringing them into the light with love. That's how you reclaim your life. And in that process, something extraordinary happens. You develop compassion. Not just for yourself, but for everyone else. Because when you've met your own darkness and loved it, you stop demanding perfection from others. You stop judging people for their masks because you know what it's like to wear your own. You start seeing pain where you once saw arrogance. You start hearing cries for help where you once saw manipulation. You stop reacting and start relating. So ask yourself, what am I still rejecting in myself? What would happen if I welcomed that part back into the circle of my being? What kind of person would I become if I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be whole? Because here's the final truth, you already are everything you need to be. Your flaws are not flaws, they are fragments. And when you gather them, when you hold them, when you make peace with them, you become something rare. Not perfect, not polished, but powerful, integrated, free. The journey doesn't end with loving yourself. It begins with telling yourself the truth. And the truth is this, the more you hate yourself, the more you fracture. The more you embrace yourself, the more you become. So stop running. Stop hiding. Stop trying to kill the parts of you that hurt. Instead, sit with them. Breathe with them. Listen to them. They are not your enemies. They are your exiled allies. And they have been waiting patiently, painfully for you to come home. That's not just philosophy. That's transformation. That's Jung. And that's you if you're willing to look in the mirror, not to judge, but to welcome back the reflection you once feared.